In this lesson, we're going to understand what is a row context. Beginners in Power BI typically fear these two words, row context and filter context. In my humble opinion, these two terms never really needed to exist because the term itself, row context or filter context, the terminology itself doesn't really mean anything. And the idea that people call actually the logic of row context and filter context is so simple, it's so easy that it never really needed this fancy terminology. I bet at some point someone tried to sound smart and created this terminology, but you will see we never really needed it. Of course, you need to understand, you need to know these terms because that's what people use. But once you learn it well, you will see that this terminology only makes things look difficult, but actually they are not. So stay tuned and come with me. I'm going to use this table. It's a sales table. We have in the first column the sales ID and the products that are being sold, and the number, the unit price, which means it's the price for one unit of each product, and the quantity sold in each sale. And what we're going to do, we're going to create a calculated column in Power BI and to calculate the total revenue for each sale. And this is the new column we're going to calculate. We are going to multiply the unit price, of course, by the sales quantity. Let's do it in Power BI. I have two files. One is a CSV file and the other one is an Excel file. You can use the one you prefer. And let's go to Power BI. And in Power BI, I'm on table view, and you can see this is the same table I actually have. When I loaded the table, I loaded the CSV file, and you can see that the columns are in the same order as in the original table. And like I said, we're going to create a new calculated column. You already know how to do it. I can use the table tools and use the new column button, or from the home tab, I can click the same button, new column button, and I'm going to create a new column, and I'm going to call it total revenue. No, I'm going to call it total sales. And what I'm going to do here, it's very simple. Actually, before we talk about row context, there's a little detail that I'm going to show you from previous lessons. If you watched the lesson on DAX structure, one of the first lessons in this playlist was lesson in which I explained how DAX formulas work and all the structure. What is a formula? What is a function? What is an argument? And I explained all that. And I told you that the total reference to any column in your data model starts with the table name. In this case, I only have one table that is called sales table, and that you start indicating the table's name, and then between brackets, you are going to mention the column's name. And in this case, the column I want is the unit price, and I'm going to multiply by the sales quantity column. In this case, I would have to indicate the sales table and then the sales quantity column. So these are the complete references, the way I taught you in that lesson on DAX, the structure of DAX formulas. And I told you we need to use the table's name and then the column's name. In this case, I'm using two columns. So again, I'm multiplying it by the sales name and column's name. But wait, it's going to work. Let me press enter. And you can see that now I have the total sales. The calculated column was just created. But let me give you a little more detail. I didn't mention that in that lesson because I didn't want it to become too much information for just one lesson. So I like to teach increasingly and gradually. And this is additional detail to complete that lesson on DAX structure and DAX references. Look, we are only referring to columns in this same table. Actually, we only have one single table, right? And of course, all of the columns we have are in the single table that I have in my model. So do I really need to indicate the table's name if I only have one table? Well, actually, no, we don't. So that makes things easier. In this case, everything, all the information I'm using is within the same table. In this case, all I have to do is indicate the column name because, of course, I'm using the same table in which I am right now. Of course, if you're referring to data from another table, then yes, you have to indicate the table's name and the column name. But I'm working in the very same table, so I don't really have to give the table's name because there's only one option here. So I will open the bracket, and Power BI will give me the list of columns that are available. In this case, I want the unit price, and I'm going to multiply it by the sales quantity, and you can see that the calculation is precisely the same. Hey, a lot of people learn from my videos, but end up forgetting to like and subscribe to the channel. Hitting that like button, subscribing, and leaving a comment really helps YouTube recommend this content to more people, and it lets me know what's working for you. If you'd like to support this project, consider getting the companion datasets for a symbolic price. It's a great way to follow along with the lessons and reinforce your practical skills at the same time. The links are in the description. And let me know in the comments what topics you'd like to see next. I'm always open to new ideas. Okay, you can also see that the calculation we are doing is horizontal. I mean, for example, for the first row, I am calculating unit price multiplied by sales quantity, and I have the total sales. For row 2, I'm again multiplying unit price by sales quantity, and this is my result. And for row 3, I'm multiplying this by this, and the result is this. And then you can see that all of my calculations are going horizontally, and horizontally. We have already seen this in the Power Query Foundations course. We have a lesson in which we discussed iteration in Power BI and Power Query. And if you haven't watched that video, please go back and watch it. I'm gonna leave the link in the description and a card here, somewhere here on top. So please go back and watch that lesson because that concept is the same one we are working here. So whenever we run some calculation, and this calculation could have a DAX function or not, you can see, for example, that here I'm creating a calculated column, but I don't have any DAX functions. I'm only using a simple mathematical operation. It's just a product. And I could make it, for example, if I was calculating something else, I could use, say, subtraction, and I could, for example, square it all. So I'm squaring everything. Any kind of calculation that I could run here. I can use DAX functions or not, but regardless of using DAX functions or not, whenever my calculations are running horizontally, I can say that it's an iteration, it's an iterating operation, or an iterating function, regardless of being a simple mathematical operation or a DAX function or whatever. If it's running horizontally in each and every row, I can call it an iterating operation. And this is the same thing as row context. So when you are operating in the row context, it means you are running some kind of operation horizontally in each row of your table. And that's it and nothing else. So that's why I say we never really needed this terminology, because when you hear someone say something about the row context, it looks fancy and it looks complicated, but it's not. All we had to know is that every function or every operation that is held horizontally in each row of the table, actually, we could just call it a row-by-row operation. A row-by-row operation is just what the row context is. So whenever anyone says, oh, okay, it's an iterating function, or it's a row-by-row function, or a row-by-row operation, or an operation in the row context, it just means this is being operated horizontally in row by row. And that's it and nothing else. So look, this operation, I would just correct it. Actually, the total sale is going to be the multiplication. And this operation is being held row by row. It's being repeated. The calculation, the multiplication is done row by row. It's horizontal. Okay, this is iteration, and this is an operation in the row context. If I had a DAX function here, we will discuss later on about we're going to discuss on the MAXX function, the MINX function, AVERAGEX function, SUMX functions. The X family of functions are all iterating functions, which means they work in the row context. And you can clearly see the difference between an iterating function, which of course, like I said, operates in the row context, and an aggregating function. For example, let me use the sum function. Again, I'm going to use the sum function. Now I'm using a DAX function, and I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to sum everything from the unit price. Okay, it's just a simple example. And if I run this calculation, you've already seen that in previous lessons, that I have the same value in every row. And why does this happen? Because the sum function is an aggregation function. It works like this. It works vertically. Functions that work vertically are aggregation functions. And in this case, there's no way I can show different values in each row because the calculation is being held vertically. It's not row by row. So this is not working in the row context. This is not an iterating function. It's an aggregation function. So please, if you haven't watched the videos about aggregation and iteration and grouping in the Power Query Foundations course, I'm going to leave the links here in the comments, and please go watch those lessons if you want to develop your skills in Power BI and DAX. In the next lesson, we are going to learn a few new functions, a few DAX functions that work in the row context, which means they work horizontally, and the evaluations and calculations and combinations of text. We're going to discuss text functions, and pretty much in the next lesson, we're going to discuss a combination of text or extraction of strings. And this is all going to work horizontally. These will be functions working in the row context, which means they are iterating functions. And at this point, I think I've already repeated that too much, and I hope you have really understood the concept of row context. That is nothing that complicated as people make it look. And if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Please take a few seconds and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below with your questions, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. And your interaction will really help us reach more people and let YouTube understand that this content is important to more and more people. See you in the next lesson.